give us a little background, especially for your story in gymnastics and then college gymnastics and onto coaching. So
Well,
how you started gymnastics.
I I can say that I started out gymnastics really kind of against my parents' wishes, but also really them kind of seeing that I had an ability, because I was just such a physically active young girl. So I grew up in a Muslim community. My parents at the time were pretty strict religious followers, and our community really shunned the idea of me being a gymnast because they just didn't feel as though it was something that a Muslim girl should be doing because of the leotards, and we shouldn't be showing our bodies. And so for a very long time that they were against putting me in anything involving gymnastics because the people in their community said that it was a big no-no, that they shouldn't do it. But it just so happened to be that the school that I was going to at the time, they did a little gymnastics unit, and the PE coach said, you really have to get her doing gymnastics. And so my parents kind of gave in at that point and said, okay, well, we'll let you do a class. And I was not in a leotard. I had to be covered. And so I did gymnastics that way. And it didn't take long before at that time, people recognized that I had an ability. And I was older to today's standards. I think I was 7 or 8 by the time I started, but really progressed very quickly. Um, and so, my parents allowed me to compete in gymnastics. I had to wear shorts at the time. So I kind of felt out of place because all of my teammates are like, why do you have to wear those? Like, we don't wear it at a competition. But, to me, it was the only way I was going to be able to do gymnastics. So I just decided that I would do it. um, and then, yeah, I just kind of progressed along. And at that point, my parents left the community that they were a part of, that were very, very strict. And actually, they got kicked out of the community because they found out I was doing gymnastics. And
Oh
so
my
they were
God.
like, we don't want you to be a part anymore because you went against our wishes and allowed your daughter to do gymnastics.
Wow.
So yeah, at that point, they started to become a little more lenient with what it was I was able to do. But I'm extremely thankful because that definitely changed the direction of my life. Um, so I got to a point where I was competing up to, I went through the whole class system because we were doing class threes, class two,
Mhm.
and then went into the level system and got up to level 9. And it was clear that at the point that I was with the club gym, I wasn't going to be able to go further. And that's when I went to Hills, and Kelly Hill ended up becoming my coach, and Toby Towson was one of our coaches as well. He was our dance teacher. And at that time we were competing compulsory routines and optional routines, and dance was such a huge aspect of what we had to do. But I really flourished at Hills. That's where, of course, Dominique and I were teammates. And I really had an opportunity to see a lot more Black gymnasts. And to me, it seemed as though that was the norm because I had teammates that looked like me. There were quite a few of us in that DC area. And so that was just kind of what I was used to. And then, of course, when I got to college, I had lots of scholarship offers to go to multiple places. And I landed at West Virginia really primarily because it was close enough to home, but far enough away. And it was a program that I saw myself being able to make better. I wasn't really lured by a top 5 team, although I was getting recruited by UCLA, Alabama,
Wow.
Michigan. There were a lot of schools that were in that top tier, but they didn't see me as an all-arounder, and that was something that I wanted to do in college. So I was going to go to a school where I would be able to compete all 4 events and maybe be in the record books and be able to make a team better, which ultimately in my 4 years at West Virginia, we got to be a top 10 program. So I was happy that I was able to be a part of that, just making history and getting the team to a level where we were nationally ranked in the top 10. So, of course, once I got into the college gymnastics scene, I was my eyes were kind of opened up to the fact that gymnastics at the collegiate level really wasn't a very diverse sport. And I dealt with a lot of scenarios, not on my team because there were other Black gymnasts at West Virginia, which was part of the other reason why I wanted to go there, because I didn't want to be on a team where I was the only Black gymnast, because that wasn't the type of club I came from. But there were a lot of circumstances in the 90s where we went and competed places and the fans were not kind to us and made it very clear that they were going to shout racist things at us and just to throw us off and to get into our head. And I never had experienced anything like that before in my life, because competing at a JO club, we never really had interactions with crowd members. You had parents that came to meets, but there was no type of fans really. But and that was an eye opener when we traveled to some places and came across fans that did not say kind things. But of course, it didn't affect the way that I competed, but it just made me feel sad that there was that element still around in the 90s.
Right.
And I guess that's because it was something that people hadn't really seen. At that time, Dominique really had burst onto the scene at the elite level, but she
Mhm.
kind of, along with Betty Okino, were the faces that people were starting to see. Now, there were Black gymnasts, of course, before them, but not getting the amount of exposure that Betty and Dominique were getting. And Dominique at that time was headed into her second Olympics
Mhm.
for 96. But it was just starting to be a sport where Black moms could say, oh, I could put my daughter in gymnastics. And here's a crazy story, which is why I'm really pushing to get college gymnastics at HBCUs. And part of this is a personal triumph. But I had gone to a college fair when I was in high school, and Howard University was there. And I was so interested in going to Howard because my grandfather went to Howard to get his PhD. My dad went to grad school at Howard. So I was like, yeah, they're right down the street. I'm interested in going to Howard. But this is me being a naive gymnast and not really knowing how the world was. I just assumed everywhere had college gymnastics programs. So I went to the career fair, to the college fair, and I had said to the representative from Howard, do you have a gymnastics team? And their response to me, and I think about it now, and their response was, we're a Black school. We don't have gymnastics. And I thought, but I'm a Black gymnast. Like, there are Black gymnasts that do gymnastics. Like, so that was interesting to me. But which is why I'm really helping to push that effort to get gymnastics at HBCUs, because we have so many Black gymnasts doing our sport, which is amazing. That I think it's time that those universities, that HBCUs, really grasp hold of gymnastics and show that they're pioneers to be able to add this sport. And I think that the athletes would thrive.